Imagine being born addicted to drugs. Imagine your body growing tumors inside your brain and spinal cord before you ever even finished high school. Now imagine your life being transformed, not in a hospital, but in a high school cafeteria. Sounds like a plot twist, right? But this is real life, and it's not just a story about one boy. It's a story about how a single act, one that might seem insignificant, can echo into eternity. And that's what we're looking at today, how the choices you make in this life echo into eternity. We're going to see how that very thing has happened to someone you probably heard of, but you never heard the details of it. Now, I want to ask you something up front. What if one single thing that you did would last forever? What if the one person you talked to, prayed for, or even just sat beside ends up changing the world? Let's get into it. This is the Echo Life Podcast, and I am Chris Adams. What you believe shapes who you become, and your choices don't just make words, they echo into eternity. Here, we break down the biblical and practical to help you become everything God's called you to be and everything He's called you to do. Let's get into today's episode. Let me introduce you to Andrew Kirby. At 16 years old in Boiling Springs, South Carolina, Andrew sat in the cafeteria like he did his entire junior high and high school career. Alone. Not a single friend to keep him company or talk to him. Nothing and no one. He wasn't just another weird kid that no one wanted to be around. He had a backstory, like all of us. And his was probably a little bit more tragic. He was someone who had survived surgeries on his back and neck. Multiple surgeries. And he was living with neurofibromatosis, a genetic disorder that causes tumors to grow on nerves throughout his body. Oh, and he was born addicted to drugs. One day, while sitting at lunch, alone, something radically changed in his life. The student council invited him to come and eat with them. Sounds small and insignificant, doesn't it? Well, maybe to you and me, but not to Andrew. Andrew's whole family had hoped and prayed that someone would reach out with some kind of act of kindness to him for years, but no one ever did. And then this happened. Andrew's mother remembers the day everything changed. She dropped him off at school in the morning, and like every day, he was somber and just wasn't into it. Probably sounds like a lot of teenagers, but that's because Andrew didn't have any friends, no one to do life with. When he entered the doors of that high school, he was alone among the crowd. But when his mother picked him up that day, he was full of excitement and joy. This one little act changed his life. The student council didn't heal his body. They didn't write him a check. They just listened. They sat with him. They invited him to eat food with them. They treated him like he mattered. That moment shifted something in Andrew's life. It proved something powerful. You don't change the world by trying to fix everything. Change the world when you change one life. Imagine all the other lives that Andrew is going to go on to change now that his outlook on the world has changed, that his countenance has changed, that his world has changed. Let me tell you about somebody else, Hayden Philpott. One morning, Hayden walked up to the school flagpole for See You at the Pole, where everyone gathers around to pray around the pole. Well, not everyone. Hayden stood there, alone, waiting for someone else to show up. But no one did. Most people would have left, but Hayden didn't. He stayed, and he started to pray. At first, he prayed and asked for someone else to join him. But as the minutes passed, his prayers changed. God, would you do something with this? Do something with my standing alone. And what happened next? Someone took a picture, and then they posted it on the town's Facebook page. Hundreds of people commented, maybe even thousands. Many of them weren't even believers, but they saw a kid with courage, a kid who stood when no one else would. People were saying that his parents raised him right. His town was totally encouraged. Let me ask you, have you ever felt like you were the only one at the pole? Like no one else sees your efforts, your prayers, or your pain? And would you still do all of it, even if no one else showed up? And here's another real question that we sometimes wrestle with. Can change actually last? I mean, that's great what Hayden did. But did the change on that Facebook post actually cause any lasting change? Did it last? Will what he did last? Can change actually last? History is full of people who've tried. Some succeeded for years, some for decades, and some for eternity. But then there's Franz Reichelt. In the early 1900s, he tried to create a wearable parachute, kind of like a wingsuit, far beyond its time. He wanted to prove it worked, so he took drastic measures. He jumped off the Eiffel Tower. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. He wanted to change the world, but his impact didn't last, and that's not meant to be a pun. The Bible talks about all of this. 1 Corinthians 3:13 says each one's work will become clear because it will be revealed by fire. Matthew 6:19 says to do not store up for yourselves treasure on earth, but in heaven. 2 Peter 3, the heavens and earth will be destroyed by fire. Only what's done for the kingdom of God will remain. And this one might surprise you, but not every good idea is your assignment. We all see the needs in the earth, in our community, but needs don't mean that we're supposed to meet them. God has called each of us to do something specific. Now, yes, if it's in the Bible, we're supposed to do it. But, and here's the catch, we need to be led by the Spirit of God in doing it. Let's look at what it says in the Scriptures. The Bible tells us, all of us, to go into the world and preach the gospel. That's the Great Commission, not the Great Suggestion. But even though Jesus laid out that commandment, we still need direction. And even the Apostle Paul was forbidden to preach in Asia at one point. That's in Acts 16:6-7. And you'd think that building a temple for God would be a great thing if you lived in the Old Testament. You'd think that we should all want to undertake that monumental task. But not necessarily. David wanted to build a temple for God. It was his passion, his dream. But in 1 Chronicles 28, God said no. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is not do the thing. Because sometimes the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. And the right thing done the wrong way is the wrong thing. Follow the Bible? Yes. Love people? Yes. But also, follow the Spirit. Let's go big picture for a second. Edward Kimball. Ever heard of him? Probably not. In 1855, he led a young shoe salesman named Dwight L. Moody to Christ. You might have heard of Moody. He went on to become one of the most influential evangelists of the 19th century. He preached in the United States and in the UK. And during one of his preaching tours in the UK, a man named F.B. Meyer was deeply influenced. He was a British preacher and writer, but he himself would go on to preach in the United States as well. And one of those meetings would influence someone named J. Wilbur Chapman. Meyer would give counsel to Chapman, and the two became good friends. If it wasn't for Meyer, Chapman might have left the ministry. If it wasn't for Moody, it wasn't for Kimball, he might have left the ministry. That's not where it ends, though. Chapman would go on to hire a former baseball player named Billy Sunday to work at his crusade meetings. And after a time, Sunday would go on to become a great preacher in his own right. You see, when you're around people, it rubs off. Just ask Andrew Kirby when he was sitting with the student council. We're getting somewhere with this, so just hold on. One of these campaigns that Billy Sunday held was in Charlotte, North Carolina. This was in the early 1920s, and a businessman's club grew out of these meetings. And so in 1934, this businessman's club invited a preacher named Mordecai Ham to come and preach for them in Charlotte. You remember what the Bible says? 1 Corinthians 3:7. So then neither he who plants is anything, nor he who waters, but God who gives the increase. That's exactly the case here. Because at this 1934 meeting, a 15-year-old boy came forward and gave his life to Jesus. Edward Kimball never met this 15-year-old boy, but what he did echoed into eternity and into this 1934 meeting when he got saved. This boy would grow up and hold meetings across the world where over 2 million people would give their life to Christ. He'd grow up to be one of the most influential evangelists of the modern era. His name was Billy Graham. I'm sure you've heard of him. All of that because one man, Edward Kimball, shared Jesus with a teenage shoe salesman. And here's the thing with all of this. Sometimes we don't see the effects that we have on people, on the world, or on eternity. Though, throw a stone in the water and watch the ripples it makes. The stone itself made the ripples, but it's not around long enough to see all those ripples. That's how it can be for us sometimes. We won't be around to see the impact that our choices have in the world. Sure, we'll see some of them, but not all of them, not the big picture, good or bad. So here's the real takeaway. You want to change the world, right? Who doesn't? Everybody does. Everybody wants to leave a legacy at some point. If not now, then when you're much older, when you're staring at the end of your life, then you start to think about these things. But now, in the here and now, is where you do it. And here's a good way to do it. Start by asking, what has God called you to do? It may take some time. You may have to pray about, seek the Lord for it, but find out what He's called you to do. Look and see who He has placed in front of you. Who is in your life to help you fulfill that call? Who are the ones that will help you on your journey, and who can you help on theirs? And then do it. Don't let the cares of this world, entertainment, distractions, the junk, pull you away from fulfilling that call. Ask yourself, what's one act of obedience I can do today? Once you find that, do it. And in all things, continually seek the Lord. Follow the Spirit of God. When He says to move, move. When He says to go, go. And when He says not to go, no matter how much you may want to do it, don't do it. Even if it's doing something seemingly as small as praying in a room by yourself. Because sometimes it's not about being famous or loud or perfect. It's about being faithful. God is looking for people who will be obedient to what He has called them to do. Because those are the people He can use to change eternity. God isn't looking for someone with all the talents or all the looks or the charisma or the money. He doesn't need those things. He's looking for someone who will be obedient to His word and His Spirit, because that's harder to find than you think. And it's obedience to the Creator of the universe that changes the world, changes eternity. You may never see the full impact of your obedience like Edward Kimball. You may never know how much you changed your community like Hayden Philpott. And you may never know how much of an impact you have on one person, like the student council had on Andrew Kirby. But God does. And one day, in eternity, you might just find out. And it might just blow your mind. And the truth is, your one small act could be the first page in someone else's eternity. It could be the dominoes that lead to the Billy Graham 100 years from now. Well, that's it for this episode. If you've gotten something out of it, think about subscribing and dropping a comment and letting me know your thoughts. Have you ever done something only to find out years later the impact that it had? I'd love to hear about it. Thank you for joining me. Stay with the Word and Spirit, and I will see you next time. That's it for today's episode of the Echo Life Podcast. If it helped you, share it with someone who needs it too. And never forget, your faith, your choices, your life, they all echo. Catch you next time.